I'm Drew.
I'm Tony.
And I'm Richard.
Yeah, we got a guest in the studio. Welcome to Back for Our Future, the show that goes back to talk about our future and Richard's past. Our past, and his future. We collectively talk about our futures and our past, and we get there by talking about movies. It started out talking about theaters. We're going to touch on that today. And then it turned into movies, and now we've included music because we've realized that our lives and our culture had a lot more to do with all of those things and not just single buildings. Anyway, today on the show, Richard joins us, world famous Richard. I'm going to let Tony do the Sean Ryan style introduction, and then we'll just mail you some gummy bears, Richard, for anybody that listens to Sean Ryan.
Who invited this punk in? Why is he here?
Who am I? Why am I here?
Why is this punk here? Who invited him? Oh yeah, I did. I'm sorry. So for anybody that has been listening to the show, of course, these are basically my two best friends right here, and outside of my family, of course, but my two not blood related best friends, and of course, Drew and I grew up across the street, and Richard was across town, but still hung out quite a bit. Oddly enough, even though I was really close to both of you at the same time, almost never hung out together. It's like all three of us. That almost never happened. That wouldn't start happening until I came back in 1998 or something like that, and from being in St. Louis for the summer, and then we used to have WCW pay-per-views and stuff like that, and you guys would both come over for that. That's about it. We never really crossed paths as I like to kind of separate my friends only because my hangouts with Drew were way different than my hangouts with Rick. And I knew that, and it was kind of I always just separated those. It was just something I did. So, you guys obviously get along, but it's just kind of what happened. I don't know. It was, I would hang out with Richard. We'd be hanging out, doing something, and Drew and I, and of course, we end up hanging out in the backyard and drinking beer and everything else, and different kind of hangouts. It is what it was. But I'm glad to have you both here on the show, of course.
Well, I'm very happy and honored to be here. I'm a big fan of the podcast. I was just watching a Juliette Lewis marathon and listening to some live and getting ready for the show. So I feel pumped. I feel energized.
That's Drew's girl.
If you guys don't know, let me tell you something. I almost feel like Richard, I've said this to Tony before. I've said it on your own post. Sometimes I feel like Richard needs his own Twitter so that I can I don't know if you're on Twitter or not, but the stuff you post occasionally on Facebook is the funniest stuff I've ever read. I almost cursed trying to keep it clean. It's so witty and dry, just what he did there. It's so perfect. Some of it's parenting related as time has gone on. Those have shifted. But dude, goldmine stuff that you... Anyway, Richard's one of my favorite of Tony's friends. I'm the best, but Richard's second best, of course. And it's because he is literally one of the funniest guys I've ever talked to. And I mean that sincerely, absolutely truthfully, hilarious guy. So welcome. I'm very happy you're on the show with us.
Well,
again, honored to be here.
Drew's a very humble guy, of course. So
I'm the humblest guy you know, and you know it.
Good stuff.
All right, well, let's jump into the show. It is September 9th, and that'll be important because the next day is my birthday.
That's true.
Okay. But more importantly, this actually is this movie ends up, unfortunately being one of the last of one of our favorite individuals of all time. We've talked about him a lot on the show. So, Tony, it's September 9th. Wagons East comes out, and that'll be the curtain call for somebody.
John Candy's final film. This is the movie that he passes away on. And, of course, Richard Lewis is in it. We just recently lost him. John C. McGinley's in it. It's a good cast. It's not noted for being a great film, unfortunately. I did enjoy it, but it's 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, I believe. One of the few movies that has that distinction. And John passed away, I think about a week or so before they were about to wrap. He was making dinner for a few of the crew members, and then he went to sleep and passed away. And this movie, a buddy of Drew and I's that when we started in the industry, uh, we both worked with a guy in transportation named Rick Damasio, who's a really, really sweet guy. And he worked on Wagons East. And when I asked him, I said, "Hey, Rick, what's the most fun you've ever had on a film set?" He named this movie as the most fun he's ever had on a film set. And when I brought up the John Candy death, he said, "Well, that was awful." But he said, "Doesn't mean we didn't have fun on the movie." So, yeah, it's true. I mean, but, yeah, I mean, John Candy was a legend. And he has several movies that are amongst my favorites. This would not be one of them, but still not a bad film. I enjoyed it, but that's just my take on it. Richard, how do you see it?
Well, I'd never got around to seeing Wagons East, but like you and like everybody else, am always a big John Candy fan. You know, always Planes, Trains, Automobiles, one of my all time favorites. I watch that every Thanksgiving. One of the few Thanksgiving themed films we have out there. Uncle Buck, and some of his cameo appearances in other films as well, like Home Alone. Uh, Absolutely, just adore John Candy. And it's sad he was taken from us way too soon. But Wagons East, yeah, I know it's got a reputation not to being a very high quality finale to Candy's career. So I have not gotten around to seeing it just yet, but maybe after talking about it, maybe I'll go check it out.
The crazy part is I think, luckily for John Candy and his estate, if you will, that that Ice Cube movie, War of the Worlds, may have become the worst film of all time.
I mean, there are several movies that have that distinction of being a 0%, but War of the Worlds definitely has taken the mantle for the time being, for sure.
Yeah, my thing with John Candy was he ironically, Uncle Buck, which is played a lot in our house because that's one of my, next to The Burbs, which is Tony and my wife's favorite movie. They bond over that. Next to The Burbs, she loves Uncle Buck, so it's played a lot. And the more I think about John Candy, it's interesting because I kind of think of him as everybody's uncle. Like we've talked about it in a lot of ways, but he just felt like everybody's uncle. And in my mind, and I'm not bringing up anything fresh, Tony, I mean this in a kind remark, but it's kind of how Skip was for me. He was like everybody's uncle, and John Candy had that vibe. So did Skip. And so not because of his size or anything related to it, but Skip had this personality that fit kind of like a John Candy Uncle Buck character. And that was endearing and great. And that's what John Candy gave us, is that sort of endearing performance. And I just got to say, the movie Delirious is my favorite John Candy movie, and it is hated on so much.
It's definitely, Delirious is without question, one of the most underrated films that has ever been released, because it's hysterically funny and a movie that didn't do well by any means, but man, that is one of John Candy's best films. There's no doubt about that.
It's 100% on the point. Richard, anything else on John Candy before I'm going to tee up the most important birthday release of my life?
Well, I'd say a often forgotten John Candy movie that I may be one of the few people who enjoys Canadian Bacon.
Yeah.
Where they have all the Canadian actors playing the Americans, all the American actors playing Canadians, and Canada and the United States going to war. It kind of feels almost topical these days. You never know. This is just a crystal ball. Something's going to happen in the future. But John Candy, I like how you described him. Yeah, he is just kind of like everybody's uncle. I don't get, even though he played a father in many roles, like Great Outdoors, I don't get a paternal vibe from him, but just kind of that fun uncle that we all had. And like I said, he's just a great comedic actor and had a great career. And I wish he was still around to give us some more of that.
Absolutely.
One quick John Candy story involving Richard. He was sleeping over at my house one time back in the day, and on cable was Who's Harry Crumb. And we're watching the movie, and he's literally going line by line by line by line by line on this movie. Okay, and I looked at him and I said, how many times have you seen this film? And he goes, oh, I've seen it dozens of times on cable. And I was like, okay. So I brought this up within the last year or so. I texted him and I brought up this Who's Harry Crumb story. And he goes, well, I might have said that I saw it dozens of times back then, but he goes, since I made the comment, he goes, I don't think I've seen it at all.
Not at all. I completely forgot about that movie just now when we were mentioning John Candy movies. Yeah. It must have been one of those moments that I've blocked out because, why I would have seen Who's Harry Crumb and sacrificed so much of my lifetime to watching that movie repeatedly. I do not know.
Every damn line. Every line of this movie. He knew every line of this movie. You would think this knew every line of a movie, would have seen it at least one time after that, right? No.
Of all movies, to be able to quote line for line, some people can do that with The Godfather. Me, it's Who's Harry Crumb. Yeah. When will that ever come in handy? Never.
At some point, it will. I swear to gosh, it will. It'll be some random time. It'll be like that. It'll be that. Do you remember that 90s commercial where the guy's like, it's the Got Milk commercial, and it's like, for the answer for $1 million, right. And the guy has it'll be you in that spot, but you won't have milk. You'll be able to answer the question like John Candy's role where he played multiple characters, and you'll be like, who's Harry Crumb?
I'll be ready. I'm waiting.
All right, so we're going to get into September 10th. I'm joking about the birthday part. No one cares. What does happen, what does come out on that is probably... Look, there's a lot of film theory that goes back and forth and arguments about this, but maybe arguably one of the most influential movies, certainly creating a genre, launching a career. We talked a little about Reservoir Dogs. Yes, ladies and gents, we are talking about Pulp Fiction. It comes out on September 10th, and I know we have some stories to get into it, but I'd love for us to just talk about the movie for a second, our takes on it. I'll go first real quick. I remember seeing it in the theater. I saw it with, I believe Stephen Coppajans may have been with me. I'm not 100% sure on this. Here's what I remember about Pulp Fiction. I hated it. And the reason why is because it was so long and I had to pee so bad that all I remember is like just holding it in. And I did not want to let my gold out, so to speak. You didn't. So I held it. And so I just remember being like, I didn't like that movie. And it was really because I just didn't have a great experience. Subsequent views of that film, certainly the more I age as a professional, which is kind of important in talking about Tarantino, because I'm not a big Tarantino fan up until recently, the more I've aged, the more I've grown to understand that guy's level of filmmaking is, unfortunately for people who don't like him, he really is one of the best on the planet. And Pulp Fiction is what really proved that he could tell a much bigger story. All right. So Richard, I know you have a story, so I'm going to jump to Tony. Tony, what's your take on Pulp Fiction?
Richard, I know you have a story. I'm going to jump to Tony. Listen, I remember in our circle of friends, the guy who wanted to see this movie the most was Alan Hardy.
Yep.
Alan Hardy loved Quentin Tarantino. And he loved Kevin Smith. Like, those were his two biggest directors at the time. He was really into the indie stuff. And he wanted to see this really bad. I wanted to see this film because I love the cast. And you know how I am about casts in movies. And this was, Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson. He wasn't nearly as big then as he would become. But, Uma Thurman, Harvey Keitel, Tim Roth, Amanda Plummer, of course, from So I Married an Axe Murderer, Ving Rhames, and Eric Stoltz. All these guys, Walken and Willis, and all these huge names. So I was turned on by the fact that all those people were in one movie. And so I did get to see this over at Village 6 and subsequently at the Dollar Theater. I saw it a couple times. But, I love it. I love the movie then. I love the movie now. It plays great. It was up for several Academy Awards for people that, love that. And, of course, got destroyed by Forrest Gump. But, another classic. But, great film. Great film, lots and lots and lots of great dialogue, tons of great one-liners, and it's just a really well-written and well-acted film.
The other thing, though, isn't this the rebirth, rather, of John Travolta's career? Isn't it Pulp Fiction that brings him back to life?
It's kind of, Quentin Tarantino couldn't see anyone else in the role but John Travolta. And so that's kind of how it all came about. And then, you know, yeah, John Travolta had, been coming off of, the franchise of Look Who's Talking, with the third one not making like any money whatsoever, and stuff like that. So he needed that rebirth, that re-energized at the box office, and this was it.
Richard, what's your take on Pulp Fiction?
I remember very well going to see Pulp Fiction. I remember I had another friend, it wasn't Tony this time, it was a friend of mine named Robert, who really wanted to see this movie. I knew nothing about it except the poster. If you remember the poster, that's kind of iconic, was on every dorm room wall back in the mid 90s. Uma Thurman, laying on the bed. There's a gun, there's a book, there's a pack of cigarettes. It's like, oh, what does this mean? I knew the guy from Look Who's Talking was in this movie. So that's about it. I knew going into it. I knew it was kind of a, auteur director who was also wrote and directed this movie. So I went in knowing zero, and saw it that opening weekend at the Village 6, theater number 4, even remember that. And was blown away by it. I really was. I loved the dialogue heaviness of it. I loved the nonlinear storytelling. I had a friend of mine that we saw with Mark, who was utterly confused throughout the whole movie, didn't realize that it was, non-sequential order, and it was like, I thought he died. How is he, walking around now? What's going on? He was asking a lot of questions, which kind of, just was a little distracting, but, I saw this in theaters multiple times, and yeah, I was absolutely blown away by it. Really was a different kind of movie, a different kind of storytelling. Very different than Forrest Gump, which had just come out and was the big Oscar frontrunner at the time, and it was fantastic. Yeah, absolutely loved it. I remember the fourth time I think I saw it in theaters. I saw it with my dad at the Dollar Theater. My dad, for those who don't know him, most of Mobile seems to have known him, but he is a very out there personality. He's very loud. He has 2 volumes, either extremely loud or he's asleep. And even asleep, he's pretty loud. He I always forget that I don't like taking him to theaters. When I ask him to go to a movie with me, and then he reminds me why I'd never take him to movies with me, because he watches movies in the theater like he watches them at home alone. And so we were at the Dollar Theater when I saw this with my dad, because my dad had heard about this movie because it was picking up steam and momentum, and a big, huge word of mouth. And he likes gangster movies and crime movies, so he wanted to check it out, and I was all in to see it again. So we went to the Dollar Theater. I think it was the opening weekend in the Dollar Theater, so it was actually a packed theater. I mean, there was just a standing room only, and we're watching, and he has a lot of questions about the movie and the content. It's not because we're not watching Godfather or Goodfellas. It's a different kind of crime movie with different type of content. But he's asking a lot of questions very loudly, and I keep on, okay, Dad, just keep them to yourself. Maybe ask me afterwards. We'll get to it. Then suddenly, we get to the scene with Zed in the basement of the pawn shop. And the infamous line, bring out the Gimp. My dad looks over to me and at the loudest volume said, "What's a Gimp?" Dad, be quiet. Just watch. Why is that guy in all leather? Is that the Gimp? Dad, it's okay. Just go with it. It's okay. Be quiet. What's the Gimp doing? Why is he tied up? What's the deal with the Gimp? What's a Gimp? Dad, it's okay. So then they take Marcellus, into the other room and, are doing their thing with him, and, they don't show it. I can just hear it. So he's like, what are they doing to that guy? What are they doing to him in the other room? They beating him up? I'm like, well, you could say they're stabbing him, Dad. Yeah. Why is the Gimp there? Tell me about the Gimp. I'm like, Dad, okay. the Gimp is basically a human sexual device that is, there for their pleasure. In the other room, he is being raped. Okay. So, and she's like, "Oh, so it's like a sex thing." And he says real loud. I'm like, "Oh dear God, I'm just sinking into my chair, hoping to dissolve and disappear." But I mean, everyone in the theater is just looking at us and just listening to us. Obviously, when I say he's not being quiet, it's not subtle at all. And we get through the rest of the movie, and when we get to the end, that's like, that was pretty good, except for that sex Gimp. Uh, and I think that may be the last movie I ever saw with him. That was 30 years ago.
It's
Um, that's seeing Pulp Fiction with my dad.
yeah.
Um,
That was at the Dollar
so
Theater.
at the Dollar Theater,
Yeah.
a fully packed Dollar Theater. Usually the Dollar Theater, because these movies have been out for a while, it's not heavily populated, but this one was packed out. And it was interesting to say the least. I don't remember anything else from that movie. At least from that viewing that day, because I just was hoping I would like turn into mist and just be able to evaporate out of that room. Because I did not want to walk out. Of course, as everyone walked out, they stared at us like, "That's the Gimp guy." Um,
Yeah.
oh my God, yeah. They just kind of giving a side eye. That's the Gimp man. But anyway, great
So
movie though. Maybe not my dad's full cup of tea, but one that I absolutely love. One of my all-time favorites.
so the Dollar Theater is interesting always because it you could go during the day and it might be a little bit more sparse, but at night that place filled up. I mean,
Hmm.
like almost every movie did. Um, just because it was so cheap. People could go see a movie they hadn't heard of for a dollar. It was $1.50 at night. But yeah, I mean, it was always kind of busy at night. But yeah, I mean, so taking your dad. I mean, listen, your dad was a very good guy. I mean, he was a lot of fun. I mean, you and I spent a lot of time at each other's houses, a
Hmm.
lot, and I just remember we've told the story. We've told the story on here before. You and I saw RoboCop 2 together, and we saw that movie together. Then you woke me up the next day, and you're like, "Hey, Dad wants to take us to go see another 48 Hours." And so we saw those movies like back to back days. So I mean, I've seen a few movies with your dad over the time. Way more well behaved during that stretch than this story right here. Because he didn't do that so much on those movies. But but man, your dad was great. I got another great story with him. So your brothers who always beat the crap out of us.
Oh, my two older brothers. I have two older brothers who are 7 and 10 years older than me. Um, and they would team up against me and my friends. You would
Yeah,
think, one of them would be on my side against the other one to even the odds, but no,
no,
no. They're both 6'3", big guys, and they would just demolish me and Tony. They
yeah,
love to beat up on Tony more than any one of my friends. Tony was their favorite target.
yeah.
But yeah, my brother's just a set up were not nice guys when growing up in that household.
So a couple stories involved in this family. Number one, I don't know exactly why you had so much of it, but I went over to your house one time, and I think it was a Christmas gift type of thing. But
The
you
silly
had
string.
silly string. Yes, you had tons of it.
I
You
can explain
had
this.
tons.
Yeah, so
I don't know where it all came from, but
it was.
you must have had 15 cans of this stuff.
Yeah, this was just after Christmas,
Yeah,
and I'll just say that Santa put silly string in everybody's stocking that year. And my brothers didn't want it. They were like, "What's this?" So it all ended up with me.
so who
And
is
but go ahead.
so who is the brother when you come through your house and you got the dining room and into the kitchen? Who's the brother that was right off the kitchen? Was that Hill?
Well, he'll it depends on when we're talking. So when Hill was upstairs in what was my room up until he went to college, and
That
then
is
yeah, and then when he moved out and I moved in that room, he was in that room. Yeah, that's right off the kitchen, and Edward was in the room right next to it.
okay. One day when he had all the silly string, we went into that room and we let off 2 cans each of silly string into this room. I mean, we unloaded on this room like nothing. I mean, it
Hmm.
was everywhere. It was everywhere. We silly stringed everything this kid owned. And it was, without question, the biggest mistake we'd ever make. Because I don't know what we were thinking when we did this. Because we silly stringed his room and we silly stringed a bunch of Edward's crap.
Yeah.
And then we didn't leave the house for whatever stupid reason. We decided that our plan was to go upstairs into your room and hide in your closet. And they
Where there's
found
no
us in like
escape.
30
Yeah.
seconds. I
Right.
mean,
I
we
mean,
went right.
I think our mindset was we will silly string everything of theirs. They will come home and see it. They got us. Oh well. Good one for Richard and Tony. I guess there's no coming back from this one. We were wrong because that was not their response. If we hit, they hit harder.
A lot
So
harder.
a lot harder. Yeah. So they came up with multiple cans of silly string. You're right. I don't know why we had like a Costco, almost a special Costco or something on silly
Yeah.
string, but trapped us in the closets. Just this tiny little walk-in closet,
And
and
we had
just
those tennis rackets to try to
yeah.
stop it. The silly string.
Hmm.
Of course, they have holes in the rackets.
Right.
It's not a very smart idea. And we weren't geniuses at the time, of course. And so we're holding these rackets and we're just getting sprayed. They found us in seconds. I don't even know if listen. I dealt with Hill and Edward on quite a few occasions. I'm not entirely sure they were really even good friends, but on this occasion, we meshed them together. They were buddies, beating the crap
Oh,
out of.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, we were the thing that brings them together.
Yes,
You're right. They didn't hang out much with each other, but when it came to beating up on Richard and Tony, they came together full force. And if it's possible to asphyxiate on silly string fumes, I mean, we were so
bad.
close.
It was
Uh,
bad.
because I mean, we almost that would have been quite the obituary that these two young boys died from drowning in silly string. But we really came very very close.
No,
I,
I
um,
I loved it because like I didn't have older brothers, so it was always fun to go
mhm.
there. And those two were just so you got one thing you got to remember about Edward is he looks exactly like William Zabka from Karate Kid.
Yes,
Looks
absolutely.
exactly
They're
like,
right around the same age.
and they're right
And
around.
when the original Karate Kid came out, and my brother Edward was in high school, people would stop him like on the streets and
He
say,
looks
"I saw you
exactly.
get your butt kicked
Yeah,
by Ralph Macchio." Um, but yeah, they look exactly alike. And of course, William Zabka's well known for playing a villain. Not only in
right.
Karate Kid, but just one of the boys and Back
Yeah,
to School,
sure.
and that was
Yeah,
the big William Zabka
yeah,
bully trilogy. Um, Edward was just like that. He was a born villain.
yeah. And and he
Hmm.
would kick our butts. And so when you're getting your butt kicked by Edward, you feel like you're getting your butt kicked by the villain from Karate Kid.
You really do.
It's kind of like an honor. You know what I'm saying? And that's the great thing about his brothers. Now, you and I would sometimes go with each other's families to various places. Like you came to St. Louis a couple times with
Yeah,
my
we go on little
family.
trips and things.
We've talked about those trips, and you came to New Orleans for some Saints games. You were the one who replaced Drew when Drew got grounded for the Nintendo Maps, which is our first episode.
I remember
And
that. Yeah, I was gladly knocked him off the tour there.
but there was an occasion when I went to New Orleans with you, and
Hmm.
that was to take Hill back to Tulane.
Right.
And so I get invited on this trip, and his dad is a huge fan of this restaurant that's been in New Orleans for centuries. Been around since like 1905. It's called Galatoire's.
Mm-hmm.
Big time New Orleans establishment. And your dad, it's like your dad's favorite restaurant.
Yeah, both my parents' favorite restaurants. Actually, I took my mom there for her birthday last year,
Oh, good.
because it's just a special occasion place. Anytime they're in New
Yeah.
Orleans, they want to go there. Their absolute favorite place.
So when you go into this place, I don't know how it is now. I haven't been in it for quite some time, but when you go into this place, jackets are required,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a nice establishment. So it's not the type of place that I normally eat, of course, because I hate wearing all that stuff. But still, on this occasion, we did go and do all this. And I remember your dad was kind of sitting at the head of the table, and I was like on the corner, so I was to his right, and you were to my right. And I remember, I ordered something fairly normal, like a chicken dish. I don't remember what you had then, but your dad ordered sweetbreads.
Mm-hmm.
He loves sweetbreads, and I had never been to this place before, and I had never had sweetbreads. I didn't know much about it, and so he looks over at me after getting this dish put in front of him, and says to me, he goes, "Tony, do you want to try sweetbread?" And I just remember looking over at his dish and thinking to myself, "There's nothing involving bread on this dish. It doesn't look appealing. It doesn't smell appealing. I don't think I want anything to do with it." And I'm like, I think I'll pass. I think I'll pass on the sweetbreads. And Richard kind of does one of these and looks over at me and whispers in my ear, and he goes, "It's calf pancreas." I'm like, looked over and said, "I definitely don't want any of the sweetbread."
Yeah,
Fun time.
my dad, would eat like every part of the animal carcass, that there was. He was kind of like a modern day Native American, when they would kill a buffalo and use every part of it. That's my dad. He would eat the pancreas, the liver. He was big on Rocky Mountain oysters, if you know what those are.
Right.
Definitely not a part you normally eat.
Right.
And he loved to try to trick people, especially my friends, into trying these things because they all have some sort of name
Yeah.
that doesn't describe the dish at all.
Right.
Sweetbread's not bread, not sweet at all. One of the most incorrectly named dishes ever. But that gave my dad jollies, is to try to trick people to eating strange parts of the animal.
Yeah, great guy. And
Mm-hmm.
both your dads were hunters, so
Mm-hmm.
they had
Yep.
that in common. But my dad not a hunter by any means. But yeah, so it was a lot of fun. Used to like hanging out with your dad as well. He was a funny guy.
Yeah, he was definitely the life of the party. He definitely, demanded the spotlight of any room he was in. My dad, he passed away about 6 years ago. Had probably 400 people come to his funeral. He was just that kind of
Wow.
guy that everybody loved. I always thought he could have run for mayor of Mobile and won, just if the people that met him would have voted for him. He would have won in a landslide.
Yeah,
But great guy, actually a great guy, and definitely you miss him a lot. But
yeah.
you definitely have some great stories about
Do
Dad.
you, does your family still own that house?
The honey camp you're
Oh,
talking
not
about?
the honey, not honey camp.
The house that we grew up in.
Yeah,
No, we sold that one. My parents downsized. Still live very close. Or I guess my mother lives, within less than a mile from that house, but don't know that house anymore.
gotcha.
People that bought it, they completely gutted it and changed the inside of it. We know the people that bought it, and I've seen pictures of the inside, and you would not recognize the house anymore. It's kind of sad in a way, kind of the end of an era, but. Um,
Well, it's interesting because the end of the era, there's one of the theaters. Not this is my poor attempt at a segue. One of the theaters that was a
Quite a good
classic.
attempt.
that got gutted recently. We had hoped for neighbors, like people you knew, to come in and revitalize it. So the Bel Air Twin, the classic, I saw Return of the Jedi there. Never forget it. I drove by it the other day. You could literally drive your car inside of it because all the walls have been blown out except for the support beams. And so like I stood there and just looked at it for a minute and just kind of, it was a moment of like reflection back. It's condemned. It's being torn down. The shell of that building will no longer exist. And it's a real shame because it's one of those theaters that I thought, I love, I'm still in Mobile. The Crescent Theater is a whole nother nightmare. If you guys have seen any of that on Facebook, it is an absolute, just terrible situation that's happened down there. I'd always thought that the Bel Air, if it had been revamped, if someone could have come along and revamped it into the indie theater where it maybe did show Superman or whatever the big hot movie was at the time, but also showed all the indie films there, they could have done something with it. They could have been a contender, but instead it's gone. And so, the impetus of this podcast was the other famous landmark for us was always the Carmike 16, and driving by it and seeing it gone. Right. I mean, it's barely in existence anymore. As far as the building is there, but it's gutted on the inside. The roof's collapsed. It's an eyesore. We don't know what they're going to do with it. I don't think mega theaters are worth unless it's like a Alamo Draft House, or I just don't think that part of Mobile would support it anymore. So I guess one of the questions I have for you guys is like, what was your favorite theater? Because I think we all have sentimental reasons to different theaters. We've talked about Village 6. We've talked about Dolphin Street on here. We've talked about Dollar Theater as the true vernacular was of it. We have Carmike 16. You have what was the mall one, Tony? What's the mall one called? Bel Air, not the Bel Air. Springdale 6. Yep. So what is your Richard, we'll go with you. What is your favorite theater? Like, what's the theater that I would phrase it this way. If it still existed, which theater would you like to still exist? Which is one you miss the most?
Well, actually, I have two. If I'm cheating a little bit, so my favorite growing up, it was closest to my house. It was the Dolphin Street 6. One thing I liked about that theater a lot, besides the drive-by shootings that would happen once in a while at night. But usually I would go before, it gets dark, and avoid it when Boys in the Hood and some of these other movies, would play. But, this is before stadium seating in theaters. And, so the best place to sit was always the front row because it was unobstructed. I was a short kid. And Dolphin Street Theater had that big space between the front row and the screen. So you can sit in the front row and you're not staring straight up at the screen. That's my favorite thing about the Dolphin Street Theater. Once the Carmike 10, that I know you guys frequented the most because it was kind of in your neck of the woods, opened, that became my theater as well. It was just newer and nicer. I hate to admit this because I know you guys are both filmmakers, but I used to sneak into that theater all the time. I probably, paid for my first semester in college in the money I saved on movie tickets, because I'll tell you my story of how I started sneaking into this movie theater. First, it was by accident. So, this is a time before cell phones. I think I was 16. I was meeting a friend to see the movie Disclosure with Demi Moore and Michael Douglas. And he was coming from over the bay. I was coming from Spring Hill. We were going to meet at the theater. It was like December. It was Christmas break, I think. I realized when I got there I had no money, so he was going to have to buy my ticket. And I didn't realize he was, stuck in like a storm over in his neck of the woods. So he had no way to contact me, pre-cell phones. So I had no idea he wasn't coming to the movie. So I'm sitting there just freezing my butt off, in front of the theater, waiting for him. I don't have money to buy a ticket. So I go up to the ticket person, which is right by the door, and say, I'm cold. I'm meeting someone here who's going to buy my ticket. Can I just wait in the warm lobby? She's like, sure, come on in. So I went in, I sat in the lobby, and it was 5 minutes after the movie had already started, previews were on, and it just dawned on me. They take the tickets over there. I'm sitting right here. I could just walk straight into the theater. So I did, because I was really wanting to see this movie. So eventually that became my thing, is I would go to the person taking the tickets. I was like, I'm meeting a friend, and can I just wait in the lobby? And sure, come on in. Then I started to get really daring, and because they offered free refills on large Cokes and large popcorns. So I bought a large Coke and a large popcorn once, and I saved the cup in the bag, and I would sneak those in with me,
Yeah.
and just go straight up to the people and say, "Hey, can I get a refill?" Once I made the mistake. It was the first film of the day, the first showing of the day. And I said, "Can I get a refill of my large Coke and my large popcorn?" And they're like, "Did you bring this in?" I'm like, "No, I just came from a movie. I mean, I've just been eating it for the last couple of hours." So I'm like, what did I just say?" Yeah, but they didn't question it, and then they just filled it up. Eventually, it got so complex that they had different colored tickets for different showings, and I had copies of each ticket. And what I did was I noticed once I left a ticket in my pocket and went through the wash, and it washed all the ink off that said the date and the time, and so if I got caught, I would just show them the ticket and say, I guess the printer's broken because it didn't print any date and time on it, but here's my ticket. And I remember the manager of the Carmike was this mean older man that had only one arm, and The Fugitive had just come out, so we thought we were very clever. We called him the One Arm Man,
Yes.
like the movie. Okay, how clever! And he was always trying to catch us, and always could never get me. So he was like my big nemesis at the Carmike 10. So the Carmike 10 became my favorite because it was an adventure every time I went. Whether would today be the day I finally get caught, but never did, never did.
Well, nobody on the planet has snuck into more movies than me.
That is true.
That is without question. That is without question one of the earmarks of my movie going is that I have snuck into more movies than probably anybody else. I'll go see 3 or 4 movies, and I will definitely not pay for numbers 2, 3, or 4. So that's just the way it is.
Tony was also the master of sneaking in food in theaters.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
Food.
I remember seeing movies with you, and you would have like foot-long subs. I think you brought
There
like
it is,
an
big
entire
sandwich.
Yeah,
The big sandwich. You can't mess with the big sandwich. It's
I think we
iconic.
had a whole meatloaf one time. I mean, it was amazing.
We've done this thing with the cups. We've done this thing with the popcorn. All this stuff. Yeah, this is all. So eventually, what they did at that Carmike was they would put somebody not at the front, but in the
Yeah,
middle,
but at the back.
towards the back.
And I totally took credit for that. When they made that move, I'm like, that is the Richard move.
No
The
doubt.
one-armed man is trying to catch me alone. So, but
So that-
I still found a way because the bathrooms were back that way.
Yeah, so now
So
you
I
can
would say,
get around on the sides as well.
yeah.
So you
Mhm.
could go to the sides; those were the exits, but you could sneak around to the sides. They would try to close them off, but you could try to do that as well. That was another maneuver to get into that theater. So my favorite theater though was Movies 10, the Dollar Theater, because it was so centrally located to all the stuff that I was doing at the time. Right, so it was right across from my school. It was literally right next to Farmore. There was Chicago's Best Pizza next to it. I mean, I loved all that stuff. So Movies 10 for me, without question. And I love the Carmike 14 as well, or Carmike 10, which would become Carmike 14. And so, I mean, those are probably my 2 favorites. But man, I do love. I mean, I'm going to cheat and say I loved all those theaters. They all had something unique. I don't think people really understand the geography of it all, right? So, like, you got Village 6, which is just literally across the street from Bel Air. Then across from that, on the other side of, running kind of perpendicular, you'd have on the other mall would be Springdale. And then right next to Bel Air, on the opposite side of the Bel Air Mall, was that Twin Cinema. So literally, those 3 theaters were all on the same block. And
And even Dolphin Street though is within earshot at that point of Springdale.
That's true.
Yeah. Now, I don't think people realize that the reason that happened wasn't because, somebody came in and decided to put 3 theaters there. It were all owned by different people at the time. Carmike would come in and buy them all, and then that's when they had to start tearing some of them down because they were cannibalizing each other. But that's kind of what happened. I mean, Carmike came in, bought all those theaters. The only one they didn't own was Movies 10, which was a Cinemark, and um, and so that's kind of how that all came about. And then when they built the big theater and off government, uh, some of those theaters lasted for a while, but then they eventually would all die off sometime in the 90s. It's kind of a
The other
shame.
thing too is, I'm sorry, Tony.
I said they were kind of a shame because they were all different. They all had different looks and were very unique, and something you don't see a lot of these days.
Yeah, growing up too, though, we had a lot of like, I remember when most of the theaters when I was a kid, pre you moving here, there was a place called the Capri, I believe it was called. I think I saw E.T. there. And so there was a lot of these, like, and I think it was a 2 or 3 screens, maybe even one. I don't remember. I just remember seeing E.T. I remember the Bel Air, but a lot of the theaters were very small, and it wasn't in the industry in that time. It wasn't about the big behemoth type theater situation that happened in our lifetime. That's our generation. The 90s is when that really kicks off. If I think back on all the theaters, like you said, all of us have said, I have memories from every single one. I remember certain movies where I saw them with as foggy as my brain is. There's spots. I have to say Carmike 10, and it became 14, as Tony mentioned, because not only did I see a lot of movies with Tony there, I saw a lot of movies with my parents. There's stories about all that stuff. But there was also a summer in which I believe a guy named Nick Shantazio was the manager. That he has 2 arms. Nick Shantazio was the manager, and my friend Sam, she was friends with him, and we would just go see movies for free. Like he would just let us in. So it was ridiculous the amount of movies we saw. And it was just anything we wanted, we would go see it. And you know, as somebody at that point in my life, I'm starting to become a filmmaker, so I'm paying attention to things. And while I enjoyed the blockbusters, there was like little quirky indie films that would come out in that time frame. Grosse Pointe Blank is one of the ones I remember seeing with Sam. And there's others amongst it, but like those films started making like the long lasting impact that would end up taking me from being a fan into I want to do this professionally kind of thing. So I have to say Carmike, and it is, I drive by it every Friday when I go to, I make my Costco runs and I drive home that way, and I drive by it and I just take a stare and just, it's one of those things. I'm not a big nostalgia person, but that's one of the memories I enjoy having. And I think that's what makes any theater special on that side of it. It also goes with the idea of like, on this show, we've learned, or I've learned, I think Tony already had this, and Richard, maybe you did too, but I think we've learned that the people, certainly this episode reiterates that, the people we see it with, even though those are moments of time, it is still a collective experience. My kids are obsessed with the stupid K-pop Demon Hunters. I was in a theater yesterday with adults and children. The adults were more childlike than the children. They were dressed up as K-pop characters. It was a sing-along version, so everyone was singing except for me. And I'm not making this up, I sat next to a guy who had come by himself and he was just a dude in the theater by himself. And at that point, it was basically like all the dads knew that guy was there because he stood out like, why is this guy here solo? And we had surrounded him. There was a dad in front of him. I was on his right. There was a dad on the left, and there was a dad behind him. We were like, one move, buddy, and you're done. One move. Because he's probably perfectly fine, but it just seemed kind of odd that you'd sit in a K-pop Demon Hunter movie sing along by yourself. Anyway, one of the things we want to say is like, one of the things we want to talk about is, do you have a favorite? Let's do our best to isolate it. But do we have a favorite movie you remember seeing with Richard? Tony, do you have a favorite movie you remember seeing with Richard that pops off?
I would say that there's a couple of them, but Wayne's World was definitely fun. We had a blast seeing that together. I remember that. And I would say Wayne's World, Groundhog Day, for sure. We had Matt Stevens along with us on that one, but it was a lot of fun. The last movie we ever saw together at the theater, and we got to update this because we got to see a movie together. But Can't Hardly Wait. Was the last
Been a
movie
minute.
we had a blast going to that movie. So I think that's probably my 3 with Richard.
Yeah,
Richard, what do you got with Tony?
One of my favorites movie attending memories with Tony was at the Dollar Theater. We did a double feature. We saw, I'm trying to remember which one we saw first, but it was Edward Scissorhands and Misery.
Yes.
And we saw
That's right.
one. I think we saw Edward Scissorhands first.
We
Then we
did.
walked to the festival center to Sadie's
Yes.
cafeteria and got
Yeah.
dinner. So we actually, I guess we did pay for the ticket twice. And then walked back and saw the other movie. You know, it was before we could drive. You know, we were just dropped off. I remember feeling so adult, like, okay, we're seeing a movie and going to dinner ourselves and going to see another movie, staying out late. Um, but that was fun. I mean, two movies I still today really like and enjoy.
Yeah.
And seeing those in a double feature, even though it's kind of a strange double feature.
It's a good one.
But yeah. And I remember seeing a movie with Tony. I remember one of the first. I can't even remember the movie. I think it was at Springdale, but I remember Tony wearing his big leather bomber jacket and having. I mean, it was like Mary Poppins bag, but
Yeah.
you know, with food. And it's, you know, pulling out so much food. I mean, it was after Thanksgiving. I think he pulled out like a plate of turkey and stuffing and pie and stuff. I was like, oh my, what is? He's like, you want some? I'm like, we had a whole buffet, you know, right there. It was amazing. I didn't like at that point. I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could bring in your own food. But after that, I've never looked back. You know, I never bought the theater food now. I have to bring in my own, and that was all inspired by Tony.
Yeah.
That's
Fun.
good.
But no, it's good stuff. I mean, yeah. We've seen a lot of movies together, so there's a lot of good
Mm-hmm.
stories. It was
Oh,
a
for
good one.
sure.
Yeah, I've obviously this show we've talked about a lot of them, and that's what we do on the show. I'm gonna have to say, obviously, it goes without saying, So Mary an Axe Murderer, because that's like kind of me and Tony's, iconic movie at Village, and I think that one's important. And we have 2 episodes dedicated to that, so anybody wants to hear that story, go listen to that. But I'm gonna tell you, if I think back to seeing a movie, his family's involved. There's a big sandwich.
Yeah.
I had to fall asleep. In the movie. If we're going to do it the right way, it's got to have all the normal traditions, and that's cliffhanger without a shadow of a doubt. 100%.
Cliffhanger is a good story, man, because that's Uncle Skip, and
It's the whole crew.
yeah, it's Cliffhanger was awesome. The only one I'm going to throw in that was kind of it's more modern is we didn't do it in the '90s. Was you and I had a blast with Adam Carden at American Reunion when we saw that movie.
We sure did.
That was a lot of fun.
We sure did.
The whole day was kind of fun. We went and shot that little take with him in front of the house, just you and I. We for the movie that we were doing, and then we all went to go see American Reunion. We went to dinner and everything else. That was a fun day. So that was a lot of fun too. The other one I wanted to throw in here was talking about which movies we would have liked to have seen with each other that we didn't get to, because I have a couple for you guys.
Yeah, go for it.
So with Richard, the movie without question that I wish I had watched with you in a theater and didn't get to, and we were planning on it and just never did it, and that's Forrest Gump. Without question, because at the time, and of course now you're a huge Auburn guy, but because you went to school there, but at the time you were an Alabama guy, and that came out, and then also we were both big history fans, so it's like that watching that movie with you would have been a lot of fun. We would have a lot to talk about. Of course, we talked about it, but we didn't get to see it together. And for Drew, it would be Bullet Train without question. Because
that's yeah. That's the movie I tried to make a million times. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. Without a shadow of a doubt. It goes back to saying why we do the show and why it's fun to do it is to have the conversations, is because, again, while cinema isn't as big as it was when we talk about the 90s, there's no doubt in my mind that cinema's not dead. Again, I'm at a K-pop Demon Hunter show, a movie that's released on Netflix. The theater is sold out. They have 6 screenings. Every screening is sold out. And there's people in the theater to experience it together. And I think it goes back to something Tony says a good bit, which is like, just go to the theater. The last stuff I got to see aside from that garbage was, I took my kids and my mom and my dad to go see Superman. And it's one of those things of like, again, just having those moments and those times. I try and take the girls to a couple movies a year because for whatever reason, I hate that Nicole Kidman AMC promo. but the dialogue's not wrong. There is something that when we are sitting there with people we care about and we enjoy it and we have that, there is a memory that forms from it one way or the other. So it's always a positive side of things. I'm going to give it up to you guys to kind of close out. So Richard, what are your thoughts just in general about movies these days? Not necessarily in a political sense, but I mean like going to the theater. What's your kind of take on why do you still go to the theater? What's your take on the theater?
Yeah, I absolutely still love the movie theater experience. I now pay for all my tickets, which is one of my changes from my childhood. But there's nothing like just seeing on the big screen and with the big sound. I think I'm quoting Nicole Kidman when I say this, but I love taking I have kids now as you do, Drew. My kids are 15, 12, and 9, so I get to take my 15-year-old. We see all the Marvel movies together, so that's a shared experience. When the Marvel universe first started, years ago, I would be seeing these movies by myself primarily. Now it's something I get to share with my kids, which is a lot of fun. I miss sometimes some of the days, like when we talk about the 90s, you'd go into a movie not knowing anything about the movie except for the poster. Now we're just kind of saturated with, all these teasers and trailers upon trailers, and you know everything about the movie before you go into it. So I kind of miss those days when you go into a movie and everything was just a complete surprise. But absolutely, I agree with you that the movie theater experience is not dead. It's live and well. I like how there's making things more comfortable. With seating, better food, better things. The Alamo Draft House, for example, does a great job with that. We were supposed to get one here where I live in Birmingham, and that one got canceled about like 2 years ago, which I'm still upset about. But I still love that theater experience. I don't get to go as often as I did before I had kids.
Yep.
Now it's a lot of wait until it's streaming situations. Before I got married, I would probably see, not before I got married, before I had kids, I would see probably a couple movies a week, and now it's just a couple movies every few months, but in the theater. But it's still a great experience for me. Still love it. Still love sharing that. It's just the experience has evolved for me. Now instead of sharing with Tony, I'm sharing with my kids.
Great.
Nothing like it in the world. Nothing like it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like going to the movies, without question. The best thing you can do. I mean, without question. And I still love going to the movies with my mom today, just like I did back in the 80s and 90s. It's the greatest thing we get to do together. I have the most fun doing it. I'll always do it. As long as her and I are both alive, we'll go see a movie every week together that we can. So I take my brother. I don't have kids, so I don't take my kids, but I take my mom and I take my brother, and we go to the movies and we have a ball every time. So it's without question the greatest thing you can do. And because it's some people view it as expensive, but it's not too expensive. You can still do it, and there's still times and days that you can go where it's cheap. Most people have cheap tickets on Tuesdays, which is a night that we usually go, and it's still a lot of fun. And you can, like I said, you can still use sites like Fandango and buy every 4 tickets you get $5 coupon. And there's other places that you can go with all these different promos and stuff like that you can buy, and all these different apps and stuff that you can use to get cheaper tickets. So do it, and take your friends and take your family and go enjoy a film. And you don't have to talk during it like his dad, but that's okay. And have a fun time, because there's nothing like watching movies together. There's nothing like it.
They should have hired you instead of Nicole Kidman.
Been a lot cheaper.
A lot
For
cheaper.
a much lower rate. Yeah.
And he's better looking. Let's be honest. He's
Absolutely.
way better looking.
He looked great in that silver suit and pair of heels, like Nicole Kidman's wearing that AMC.
You know that if we would have had any one of us in that spot, we would have tripped at some point. There's no way that you haven't gone up and down those stadium steps and not tripped at some point. It would have been catastrophic. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode. Listen, we've we say it all the time, but if you enjoy the show, please feel free to jump out and or jump online if you decide to. Give us a rating, a review. All of that stuff is very helpful for us, but also like share the show. If there's anybody out there, I think we should start a campaign to tag Fandango, get them to sponsor this. Maybe they'll give us free tickets because Tony's right. You can save money. I just did it with K-pop Demon Hunters, so proof positive. I didn't have to pay full price for a bunch of crap. So Fandango, thanks for saving my ass. All right, I'm going to let Tony do his thing where he says the last final word. Tony, it's all you. Oh, no. Let's give it to Richard. Richard, you got the final word. Final word
for me. What an honor. Well, this was an honor to be here with you two gentlemen. I hope this is not the last time I get to see and talk to you. But everybody, go out there, go find your favorite films from the 90s, from today. Enjoy them. Like Tony said, it's a wonderful shared experience. Go out there and share your favorite movies with those people you enjoy.
Perfect.